There's a Forest Service handbook from 1941 that lists in plain language which roadside plants a hungry family can eat. The handbook is still in the National Archives. The plants are still by the road. What changed is that we stopped teaching anyone to recognize them, and then we made it illegal in most cities to gather them on public land. Tonight, 20 things ordinary people knew how to do or were allowed to do that we are not. Number 14 involves a Supreme Court case. Number 3 is a law your grandmother probably broke. Subscribe, because this list goes places. Let's count down. Number 20, the newspaper in the icebox. Before the Frigidaire took over American kitchens in the late 1930s, most households kept food cold with a literal block of ice, delivered by a man with tongs and a leather shoulder pad. The trick wasn't the ice. The trick was the newspaper. You wrap the block in 3 or 4 layers of yesterday's paper before you set it in the chest, and that ice lasted half a day longer. Newsprint is mostly air. Air is the cheapest insulator on Earth. A modern refrigerator runs about 400 kilowatt hours a year, which works out to roughly $60 on your electric bill every year forever. The icebox cost nothing to run. The newspaper was free. The man with the tongs came twice a week. Number 19, the grease jar. There was a tin can on the back of every stove in America, and the rule was simple. You cooked bacon in the morning, you poured the fat through a square of cheesecloth into the can, and the can sat there. That fat fried the eggs at lunch. It seasoned the beans at dinner. It went into the cornbread on Sunday. 1 pound of bacon gave you maybe 1/3 of a cup of usable fat, and that fat did the work of a whole bottle of cooking oil. Today, the average American household throws away about $160 of cooking oil a year and buys candles scented like, I'm not making this up, bacon. The jar is sitting in an antique store in Ohio right now for $12. Number 18, white vinegar. A gallon of distilled white vinegar in 1935 cost about 15 cents. It cleaned the windows, it cleaned the floors, it cut grease on the stovetop, killed the smell in the icebox, softened the laundry, and rinsed the hair. 1 bottle. The entire house. Walk into a Target today and count the cleaning products. There's one for granite, one for stainless steel, one for glass, one for tile, one for the toilet, one for the toilet that's a different color. The active ingredient in most of them is, and I want you to sit with this, diluted vinegar with dye and fragrance added. A gallon of white vinegar at the grocery store is still under $4. The markup on the bottle with the spray nozzle and the lemon scent is somewhere between 800 and 1200%. Hold on to that fact because it pays off 2 items from now. This is the one nobody believes until they check the label. Number 17, the flour sack dress. In 1924, a salesman at the Gingham Girl Flour Company noticed something. Farm wives were turning the company's plain white cotton flour sacks into clothing for their daughters. The sacks were good cotton, 25 pounds of it, sewn shut with a chain stitch you could pull out in one tug. So the company started printing the sacks in florals, then plaids, then nursery prints for baby clothes. By 1942, you could buy flour in over 200 different patterns, and women were choosing brands by which pattern they wanted that month. A dress for the cost of dinner. The fast fashion industry today produces about 100 billion garments a year, and roughly 60% of them end up in a landfill within 12 months of being made. The flour sack dress lasted until the daughter outgrew it, and then it became a pillowcase. A footnote on the sacks. The Textile Bag Manufacturers Association actually held design competitions in the 1940s, and major mills employed full-time pattern designers whose entire job was to design feed and flour sacks women would want to wear. Companies like Percy Kent and Bemis Bag printed care instructions on a removable label so the dress wouldn't have a brand name across the back. The industry knew exactly what it was selling, and it sold it for 40 years. Number 16, the dandelion. In 1932, the dandelion was a vegetable. The leaves went into salad, the roots got roasted and ground for a coffee substitute. The flowers became wine. A family with a yard had a salad bar growing out of the lawn from April through October, and the plant is, pound for pound, more nutritious than spinach. More vitamin A, more calcium, more iron. Then the lawn happened. The American lawn care industry is now a $170 billion business, and a meaningful slice of that revenue comes from selling people poison to kill the plant their great-grandmother ate for dinner. A bag of organic dandelion greens at Whole Foods runs about $6 for 5 ounces. The same plant is growing right now in the cracks of your driveway. Number 15. Potato water. When you boiled potatoes for supper, you did not pour the water down the drain. That water was thick with starch, and starch was the closest thing a poor kitchen had to a magic ingredient. A cup of it went into the bread dough and made the loaf softer and longer lasting. A splash thickened the gravy without flour. The rest watered the houseplants because the minerals were good for the soil. 1 pot of potatoes, 4 uses. The modern equivalent is a jar of cornstarch, a bottle of bread improver, a bag of houseplant fertilizer, and a guilty conscience about food waste. The American household throws away roughly $1,500 of food a year. That number used to be 0 because the concept did not exist. Number 14. The vinegar and the newspaper. Here is the payoff I promised you 2 items ago. Spray white vinegar on a window, crumple a sheet of yesterday's newspaper, and wipe. The window comes out streak-free every time. The reason is chemistry. Newsprint is a dense, lint-free fiber that doesn't shed onto the glass the way a paper towel does, and the slight ink residue acts as a very mild abrasive on grime. This was common knowledge in every household in America until about 1962, which is the year a Procter & Gamble subsidiary launched a blue liquid called Windex into national television advertising. Within 10 years, the newspaper trick was a grandmother story. Windex today is about $6 for a 26-ounce bottle. The vinegar costs about 40 cents for the same volume. The newspaper is on your neighbor's lawn. This is the one that surprised me when I first checked it. Now a pattern break, because we need one. Imagine the root cellar, a hole in the ground, walled with stone, dug under the back of the house or into the side of a hill. 55 degrees, year-round, no electricity, no compressor, no sound. Potatoes in one bin, carrots and sand in another, apples on a shelf wrapped in newspaper, jars of preserves stacked along the back wall. A family ate from that room from October through April. The room cost nothing to run. It made no noise. It never broke. The American refrigerator freezer is the single largest electrical appliance in most homes, runs continuously for 15 years, and gets thrown into a landfill when the compressor dies. The root cellar lasted as long as the house did. Number 13, pectin from apple peels. When a farm wife made apple pie, she did not throw away the peels and the cores. She put them in a pot of water, simmered them for an hour, and strained the liquid. That liquid was pectin, the gelling agent that turns fruit juice into jam. A bag of commercial pectin at the grocery store today costs about $4.50 and makes maybe 4 jars of jam. A bushel of apples produces enough peel and core pectin to put up the entire summer's berry harvest for free from a part of the fruit you were going to compost anyway. A note on the cellar: the temperature stability comes from the earth itself. About 6 feet down in most of the continental United States, the soil holds a steady temperature roughly equal to the annual average air temperature for that region, 50 to 55 degrees across most of the country. That's why the cellar didn't need power. The ground was the refrigerator. Modern geothermal heating systems use the exact same principle, and a residential installation runs about $25,000. Number 12. Honey on the wound. A child in 1928 cuts her hand on a barbed wire fence. Her mother does not have penicillin because penicillin will not be available to civilians for another 17 years. She has a jar of honey on the shelf. She washes the cut, spreads honey across it, wraps it in a clean cloth, and changes the dressing twice a day. The wound heals clean. The reason it works is that honey has a water content low enough to draw moisture out of bacterial cells, and bees add an enzyme called glucose oxidase that produces small amounts of hydrogen peroxide as it sits. Honey is, chemically, an antibacterial agent. This is not folklore. The FDA approved a medical-grade honey product called MediHoney for clinical wound care in 2007. And it is currently used in burn units and for diabetic ulcers in hospitals across the country. The grandmother in 1928 was right. The hospital just charges more for the same jar. Number 11, the ham bone. You went to the butcher counter on a Friday and you asked for a ham bone. The butcher gave it to you. He did not charge you because the bone was a byproduct, and the assumption was that a customer who took the bone would come back next week and buy the ham. That bone went into a pot with a pound of dried navy beans, an onion, a carrot, and a stalk of celery, and it fed a family of 6 for 2 days. Today, the butcher counter at most American supermarkets has been replaced by a refrigerated case of pre-cut, plastic-wrapped portions, and the bones go into the rendering bin behind the store. A pound of dried navy beans is about $2. A ham bone, if you can find a butcher who still has them, is about $4. 8 meals for $6. The frozen entree aisle is 50 feet to your left. Number 10, canning. Glass jars, a kettle of boiling water, and a quiet afternoon in August. A bushel of tomatoes that cost $3 at the farm stand became 30 quarts of sauce on the cellar shelf, enough to last the family until the next summer. The technique was published as a USDA bulletin in 1917, free, and women's clubs across the country taught it for nothing. Then, in the 1970s, a series of botulism scares pushed canning out of the home kitchen and into industrial facilities. Some of those scares were real. Botulism is a serious thing, and the modern guidelines about pressure canning low-acid foods exist for genuine reasons. But the net effect was that 2 generations of American women lost a skill their mothers had, and the average family now buys their tomato sauce in a jar at the grocery store for $6 a quart. Same tomatoes, same jar, a 2,000% markup. This is the one that tells you everything. Number 9, lard biscuits. Lard was rendered pork fat, and every farm kitchen had a crock of it next to the stove. 2 cups of flour, a teaspoon of baking powder, a pinch of salt, half a cup of lard, and enough buttermilk to bring it together. 12 biscuits, 15 minutes in a hot oven, almost no money. Lard makes a flakier biscuit than butter does because the fat crystals are larger and they create more distinct layers in the dough as it bakes. Then, in 1911, Procter & Gamble introduced Crisco, a hydrogenated cottonseed oil designed to replace lard in the American kitchen. And they spent the next 40 years running an advertising campaign that associated lard with poverty and Crisco with modernity. By 1950, lard sales had collapsed. We now know that the trans fats in hydrogenated vegetable oil are directly linked to heart disease, and the FDA banned them from the American food supply in 2018. Lard, the thing they told your grandmother to throw away, is back on the shelves of specialty grocery stores at $12 a pound. A note on Crisco. The launch campaign in 1911 was one of the first modern integrated marketing efforts in American history. Procter & Gamble mailed free cookbooks to every household listed in select city directories, sponsored cooking demonstrations in department stores, and placed full-page advertisements in magazines aimed at middle-class housewives. The cookbook contained 250 recipes, every single one of which called for Crisco. The product was not better than lard. It was just better at advertising. Number 8. Bread heel pudding. The 2 ends of a loaf of bread, the crusts nobody wanted to eat plain. You did not throw them out. You let them dry on top of the icebox for a week until you had 8 or 10 of them, and then you made bread pudding. Tear the heels into a buttered baking dish. Pour over a custard of 2 eggs, 2 cups of milk, half a cup of sugar, a splash of vanilla, and a handful of raisins if you had them. 45 minutes in a moderate oven. Dessert for 6 people, made entirely from the parts of the meal you would have thrown out. The American household today wastes about a third of the bread it buys, which works out to roughly $70 a year per family. The dessert aisle at the grocery store is on your right. Now stop for a moment, because the next item is the cleverest thing in the whole list. The hay box, a wooden crate about 2 feet on every side lined with hay or straw or shredded newspaper, with a hinged lid. You brought a pot of stew to a hard boil on the stove, 15 minutes, and then you put the whole pot lid on into the hay box and closed the top. The insulation held the heat. The stew kept cooking slowly for the next 4 to 6 hours while you went to the field, did the laundry, fed the chickens, and came back to dinner. No fuel, no flame, no watching. The hay box was functionally the world's first slow cooker, and it predated the crock pot by about 100 years. The crock pot today retails for around $50 and uses about 150 watts of electricity for 8 hours. The hay box used hay. Number 7. The cough syrup. honey, lemon juice, and a tablespoon of whiskey warmed in a cup. The honey coated the throat. The lemon thinned the mucus. The whiskey numbed the cough reflex enough to let a sick person sleep. Total cost in 1935, about 8 cents. A bottle of NyQuil today is around $9, and the active ingredients are an antihistamine, a cough suppressant called dextromethorphan, and 10% alcohol. It is, functionally, the same drink with a child-proof cap and a marketing budget. The grandmother's version did not have acetaminophen in it, which means it also did not contribute to the roughly 50,000 emergency room visits a year in the United States caused by accidental acetaminophen overdose, most of them from people taking cold medicine on top of other cold medicine. Number 6. Buttermilk. Real buttermilk is what is left in the churn after you make butter. It is naturally tangy, slightly thick, and full of live cultures that make biscuits rise and pancakes tender. Every farm kitchen had a crock of it, because every farm kitchen made butter, and the buttermilk was the byproduct. When milk soured on the counter in summer, that was not spoiled milk. That was buttermilk, free, from a process you did not have to do anything to start. It went into pancakes, biscuits, cornbread, and ranch dressing before ranch dressing was sold in a bottle. Walk into a Whole Foods today, and a quart of cultured buttermilk costs about $7. The exact same liquid your great-grandmother fed to the pigs because she had too much of it. This is the one that tells you who won the marketing war. Number 5. Twice-used cooking fat. You fried chicken on a Sunday. The pan had half an inch of fat left in it. You strained that fat through a coffee filter, poured it into a clean jar, and labeled it. Chicken fat went into the gravy on Tuesday. Beef drippings from the Sunday roast became the base for Wednesday's hash. Bacon grease, as we covered earlier, did everything. 1 pound of fat could season a week of meals before it was finally used up. The American restaurant industry now produces about 2.5 billion gallons of used cooking oil a year, almost all of which goes to industrial recyclers to be turned into biodiesel. The home kitchen produces almost none, because the home kitchen does not save it anymore. The fat goes down the drain and clogs the city sewer. New York City alone spends about $18 million a year unclogging grease from its pipes. A note on the hay box. The technique is documented as far back as the 1860s in Norwegian and German cookbooks, where it was called a kochkiste, or a fireless cooker, and the United States Department of Agriculture published plans for building one as a wartime fuel-saving measure during both World War I and World War II. A well-built hay box could hold cooking temperature above 140 degrees Fahrenheit for up to 8 hours. Modern thermal cookers, sold under brands like Thermos and Salad Master, are the same idea in stainless steel, and they retail for around $200. Number 4. Regrowing vegetables from scraps. The bottom inch of a celery stalk set in a shallow dish of water on the windowsill will grow a new celery plant in about 10 days. The root end of a green onion, the same. Lettuce hearts, garlic, cloves that have started to sprout, the eyes of a potato, the top of a pineapple, the seeds of a tomato. Almost every vegetable in your grocery bag contains, somewhere on it, the parts you need to grow another one. During the Second World War, the federal government asked Americans to plant victory gardens, and Americans planted 20 million of them. By 1944, those gardens were producing roughly 40% of all the fresh vegetables consumed in the United States. 40%. From backyards and vacant lots and rooftops. After the war, the program was quietly wound down, the seed catalogs got thinner, and the supermarket produce section grew. The average tomato in an American grocery store today has traveled 1,500 miles to get there. The one on your windowsill traveled 4 feet. Number 3. The fizzy water cake. 1933. A housewife in Kansas wants to bake a cake for her daughter's birthday. She has flour, sugar, cocoa, and a bottle of seltzer water. She has no eggs, no butter, no milk. She mixes the dry ingredients, pours in the seltzer and a little vegetable oil, stirs, and bakes it. The cake rises. It is tender. It is, by any honest measure, a real cake. The chemistry is this. The carbon dioxide in the seltzer water provides the lift that eggs and butter normally provide, and the acid in cocoa powder reacts with baking soda to produce more carbon dioxide as the cake bakes. It is the same principle as a soda bread, just with the bubbles already dissolved into the liquid. They called it a wacky cake, or a crazy cake, or a depression cake, and the recipe is in church cookbooks across the Midwest to this day. A boxed cake mix at the grocery store costs about $3 and contains, listed on the side of the box, 14 ingredients including emulsifiers, stabilizers, and artificial flavor. The depression cake has 6. This is the one that proves they knew what they were doing. Number 2, seed saving. You did not buy seeds every spring, you saved them. The best tomato of the season got cut open, the seeds scraped onto a paper towel and dried on the windowsill. Bean pods left on the vine until they rattled. Lettuce allowed to bolt and go to flower so the seeds could be collected from the stalks. Every garden was a seed factory, and the varieties that grew well in your soil, in your climate, with your water, got better every year because you were unconsciously selecting for them. Then came the hybrid seed. Hybrid seeds are bred to produce a uniform crop the first year, but the seeds they produce do not breed true, so you have to buy new seeds every spring. Then came the patented seed. It is currently illegal in the United States to save seeds from most commercially sold varieties because the genetics are owned by a corporation. 4 companies now control more than 60% of the global seed market. Your great-grandmother owned her tomatoes. You rent yours. Number 1, the everything garden. The front yard, the backyard. The strip of dirt between the sidewalk and the street, tomatoes along the fence, beans climbing the porch railing, squash sprawling across what used to be a lawn, herbs in pots on the front steps. Before the Second World War, this is what an American yard looked like, and nobody thought it was strange. After the war, the suburb happened, and with the suburb came the Homeowners Association, and with the Homeowners Association came the rule that the front yard had to be grass. There are towns in the United States today, real towns with real ordinances, where it is illegal to grow vegetables in your front yard. People have been fined. People have been sued. A woman in Oak Park, Michigan, faced 93 days in jail in 2011 for growing tomatoes and squash in her front yard. The case was dropped after national outrage, but the ordinance is still on the books. The lawn that replaced the garden is the single largest irrigated crop in America, larger than corn, and it produces nothing. Here is your challenge. Pick one, just one. Save the bacon grease this week. Try the vinegar on the windows, plant the celery bottom on the windowsill, and watch it grow. The point is not to live in 1933. The point is to remember that the knowledge existed, that it worked, and that it was taken from us one product launch at a time. Teach one of these to somebody younger than you. That is how it comes back. Tell me in the comments, which one of these did your grandmother do, and which one are you going to try first? A note on the Oak Park case. The woman's name was Julie Bass, and the city ordinance she was charged under required front yards to contain suitable plant material, which the city's planning director defined in a deposition as common, meaning grass, shrubs, and flowers. Bass had built 4 raised beds in her front yard and planted them with tomatoes, peppers, squash, and herbs. The story went viral. The city dropped the charges and Bass kept the garden. The ordinance was never changed. Similar laws are currently active in an estimated 60 million American households governed by homeowners associations, and challenging them in court costs, on average, between $15,000 and $40,000.